Monday night, my Minnesota Vikings come to my Chicago to take on the Bears. The Vikings are nearly a touchdown favorite, 6.5-point favorites on the road. Total is at 44.5. Chicago has not been a friendly confine to the Minnesota Vikings, but Chicago is struggling with some COVID issues and, football. They're struggling with football. So what do you think, Vikings or Bears?
I don't think you take the Vikings at this current number. Obviously, it's opened up at 3.5. It's pushed up all the way up to 6.5. I think at this point, it's either Bears or pass. But I think this is a game that possibly can go over. Like when you look at these defenses, who do you really trust to truly get a stop? When you look at the Vikings, they're just 17th in EPA per play. The Bears are 27th. When you look at the drop back EPA per play, the Bears are just 26th. Vikings are 11th, but I don't really trust them to go out there and consistently stop any team. So I think if I had to play anything, I'd play the over, but I'm not really high on anything at this point.
Yeah, this for me as a Vikings fan, this is going to be a game that I am not touching just because I've lived in the Chicago area for 2 decades now. And since I moved here, Minnesota coming to Chicago has not gone well for me. That day of the game, not well. That day after the game, usually not a great one for me either as a Vikings fan, because this century in Chicago, Minnesota has won 4 out of 20 times visiting the Bears in Chicago this century. 12 of those 20 games have been one-score games. And by the way, 12 of 13 Minnesota games have been one-score games this season. So at 6.5, I feel pretty good about the Bears here. Minnesota this entire century has won in Chicago by more than a field goal one time. It was last year against Nick Foles, and the Vikings still need a touchdown with 5 minutes left just to get over there. So the history here screams Chicago, plus 6.5, plus 240 on the money line. If you're not willing to bet it, maybe you wait and live bet it. Raheem, you've given the stat over and over again. What's Minnesota do? They take the lead. Minnesota's led by 6 or more in every single game this season. So if the Vikings are already 6.5-point favorites and take the early lead like they always do, now you probably can get the Bears at more than a touchdown underdog. And just for the cover, how do you feel about that one? Maybe going for the live angle.
I really like approaching that from a live angle. I mean, we've just seen time and time again, this Vikings team, they can't consistently get stops. And we all know you never want to bet Kirk Cousins in prime time. For whatever reason, he's just 8-17 straight up in prime time. Look, there's been 62 quarterbacks with more than 500 pass attempts in prime time. Among them, Kirk Cousins' 32 win percentage is 4th worst among all quarterbacks. The only quarterbacks who are worse are Jeff George, 2-17, Andy Dalton, 6-18, and Chris Everett. To quote the great Jim Rome, is 8-18. So I don't know. It's just maybe you do want to wait for this to get 7 or take a cheap buy to 7 and put a little something on the Bears.
Yeah, look, if you're playing this game on paper, the Vikings win because the Vikings, the last 6 weeks, number 2 in EPA offensively. So very good. Kirk Cousins on the season, EPA plus completion over expectation has been top 5 the last 4 weeks. First quarter, he's number 1 among all quarterbacks in that stat for the season. And before you point out, fourth quarter is still top 10. He's still hanging around. Kirk has been good. The Vikings offense has been good. The Vikings should dominate both sides of the passing game here. Passing defense should be able to shut down whatever is left of the Bears passing attack. Passing offense should be able to attack a very beatable Bears secondary. On paper, Minnesota should be favored by 6.5 and get this win, but Minnesota has not played any games on paper this season. They always find a way to get the lead and give it back. And in Chicago, they always find a way to let things stay close. So I will play this one. I was teasing earlier. I'm a Vikings fan, but I have to take the Bears here. The history screams out Chicago here. So I'm just debating on whether I will play it now or wait for that lead and hope that I get a little bit better line. I think either one is a good play, but I agree. There's no way I'm putting my money on Minnesota here. So I think it's Chicago or pass, but I think Chicago is a pretty good angle here at home.
Yeah, I like as we talk through this game, I'm kind of with you, and I think you can get a cheap buy to 7. I think that has a positive expectation long term.